Check out my newest release, Nadia and Aiden, available now. Told in a unique, dual first-person narration style, Nadia and Aiden explores what it means to be American from the standpoint of two kids who grew up in France with an American mother. It also looks at how we define family beyond DNA and blood relations, when life isn't always that simple. You can find Nadia and Aiden on Amazon in paperback, Kindle, and Kindle Unlimited. The link is in the podcast description. On this episode of the DTVC podcast, we've got Sean Malloy from I Must Break This podcast on to discuss Darkness of Man, a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie that came out this past year, but it was on Rent VOD. So I waited until it was on the free streamer. It was on, well, I mean, Hulu, I guess, is technically not a free streamer, but it's on a streamer that's included in a streaming package, I should say. You don't have to pay extra to rent it. So finally, now that it's on Hulu, I figured I'd cover it. And Sean, he's someone we've had on to discuss Van Damme before. He loves chatting Van Damme, so I thought it would be perfect to have him on for this. And this is actually kind of in a way, a bit of a two-part episode in that he's going to come back in February and discuss Van Damme's newest one, Kill 'Em All 2. We're going to discuss actually both Kill 'Em Alls, but again, that'll be next month. That'll be in February. Today, we're just doing Darkness of Man. So stay tuned for that one here in a few minutes. And then coming up in the coming weeks here, I've got some more recording to do, so I don't want to sort of, mention, I can give you a sense of who we're going to be recording with. So John Cross from After Movie Diner, looking to have him on to discuss T-Force. A couple of my friends from high school, my friend, they're going to be coming on. We're going to be recording soon to do Bad Taste, so that'll be a fun one. The interesting thing about Bad Taste as well, having them on, I was going to say their names, Mike Palos, Mike Petrowski. I was going to say their names, but the names aren't going to necessarily mean anything to you, right? Unless you're friends of mine personally, But they're going to be on. We're going to be recording this weekend to do Bad Taste, and actually we have a large New Zealand audience. We're consistently ranked in the top 200 for film and movie reviews in New Zealand, so this will kind of also be a nice one for them as well to do a New Zealand film for that New Zealand audience. And of course, thank you all for listening as well. Happy to be ranked in the film reviews category in New Zealand consistently week after week there. So definitely thank you to all the fans that we have there. I know Scott Murphy from All 90s Action all the time. I'm sure he probably props up a good amount of it because I know he listens to our show. We have him on the podcast as well, and he lives in New Zealand. But anyway, so that's one we're going to be recording soon. Looking to have the guys from have Nathan Shepka and Tom Joliffe on to discuss their newest one, Baby in the Basket, which is coming out in early February. So we're recording with them soon. But then, that one, when we record it, a matter of when we'll post it, it probably could depend on when they want it kind of strategically to coincide with their upcoming release. So we'll have that one soon. And then, of course, Ty from Co-Opits, I recorded our February episode with him already. We're going to be looking at two Alec Baldwin movies, Alec on the Skids. So that was a lot of fun. And the last episode that we did, Turf War and Blood Money, the one with hip-hop stars in them, that one has been really well received. People have really enjoyed that one. So probably, once you're done listening to this one, go back into the archives if you haven't and check out the one from last week as well. Yeah, now in terms of the site, recently you saw, I was supposed to be doing King of the Killers this past weekend, but, untimely passing of David Lynch. I wanted to do something in his honor. Duran Duran Unstage, a concert film from 2011 that Lynch directed, was available on Tubi. It's also technically direct to video, so I thought it would be kind of a fun way to to acknowledge him, to remember him there and pay homage to him. So that was what we ended up posting over the weekend. It was a long weekend in the U.S., so I posted it on Monday. But yeah, this weekend we should get back into King of the Killers. And then, from there, I'm not sure. It might just be, as we kind of finish out the month of January, it might just be whatever's next on that upcoming reviews watch list on Letterboxd. So we'll kind of, stay tuned for that as well. Speaking of Letterboxd, I am I'm a little bit less than halfway through the alphabetical archive on Letterboxd. So that should be coming soon, hopefully, if I can just kind of keep working through a few letters a day and keep kind of updating a little bit. I didn't really do any of it last week. Last week was a bit of a tiring week, just because between recording podcast and then me making a trip to Washington to see a hockey game, which Washington's not that far away, just to give you a sense. It's only a couple hours by train. But, if you think about it, when you add 2 hours by train on either side and then 3 hours for the hockey game, you get 7 hours there. It's usually more like 10 because you get there early, got to get to the train early. So by the time I got home, went to bed and everything, it was like 1, 2 in the morning. And I think I just never quite recovered for the rest of the week. But recovered now with a long weekend here in the U.S. So we'll start kind of catching up on some more of that stuff and getting everything else that they can. But yeah, stay tuned for that as well. I was thinking about releasing the Letterboxd list the alphabetical list like now, even though it's not finished, so people can kind of see it finishing. But I think I'm just going to release it all in one go once it's all ready to go. So yeah, of course, stay tuned for that. And if you're curious about any of those things, socials are the best place to keep an eye out. I will post letterbox lists as well as updates on the podcast and things like that. I'm debating. I'm thinking Blue Sky might be more my go-to going forward. It's just that the thing I don't like about Blue Sky compared to Facebook is that Facebook I can post longer form posts, so I can kind of give more of a sense of like what the episode or what the letterbox list or what the blog post is about, and I like being able to do that on Facebook. Whereas Blue Sky, again, it's similar to X or Twitter or whatever, in the sense that you're limited to a certain amount of characters. So that's the only thing. But Blue Sky is a little bit easier. I can get on there, pop in, put the post, things like that. So if you're not following us on Blue Sky, definitely check us out there. I think I did a post on Instagram showing because it's the other problem with Blue Sky is that because it's sort of like the way that they do their handles, it's a little bit harder for me to just kind of remember off the top of my head what it is. But definitely look for the direct-to-video connoisseur on Blue Sky. Follow me. If you're a review site fan, something like that, I usually follow back on there. So definitely give me a follow. Starting to use that one a little bit more. But Facebook as well. Instagram too. I will kind of put things on Instagram. But again, Instagram is similar. Yes, there's no post limit on Instagram, but there's a link limit, right? You can't post links on Instagram posts. So that's kind of annoying because it's like, if I want to post something that isn't in my link tree, it makes it a little bit more difficult. Facebook is just kind of easier for all of those kinds of things. And I do think more of the site's followers are on Facebook, and probably, it's easier for them if you're on Facebook and you're just sort of scrolling your Facebook page on your phone or on your computer or something like that. At the end of the day, you see my post. It's probably a lot easier than Instagram, Blue Sky, or any of the other ones. So Facebook, I'll probably kind of be keeping that one up, but kind of maybe start putting more on Blue Sky as well to kind of keep the two of them going there. That was a lot. That was a lot on social media that I wasn't planning on saying there. Sometimes you just get going. You just start rambling about those kinds of things. So, maybe this is a good place for us to wrap this up and then get into the actual episode itself. So, just one last thing, of course, my novel. You may have heard the commercial for my novel before I got into my cold open here. Nadia and Aiden, available on Kindle Unlimited, and paperback. Recently had some sales, both paperback and Kindle. Again, I get paid roughly the same for either one, so I always appreciate, however somebody buys the book. Sales are always appreciated. And of course, if you've read it, for people that have bought it, if you've read it, you want to let me know what you think of it. Of course, definitely do. I also have kind of more traditional novels. Nadia and Aiden is sort of a more experimental narration form. It's sort of a dual first-person narration. It's a novella. It's shorter, so it's a little bit different compared to my previous four, which are more standard novels. Definitely, definitely more. I don't know, more of a, if you're looking for something more standard from a prose standpoint, those might be more your speed. And of course, there's Bainbridge. Bainbridge, my short action novel. If you're looking for more action, that always will do the trick as well. And you can find all of those on my author website. You'll also find them all on Amazon. Just look for my name on Amazon, and you should be able to see them there. All right, so why don't we have John from After Movie Diner playing our theme song here, and then when we get back, Sean Malloy from I Must Break This podcast will be on, and we will be looking at Darkness of Man. Welcome back to the DTVC podcast. As always, this is Matt here, and I am joined once again by a very special guest, Sean Malloy from I Must Break This podcast. Welcome back, Sean.
Hey, thanks for the invite, man. I'm always happy to chat the muscles from Brussels, Mr. Jean-Claude Van Damme. So, I mean, it's fair to say, the guy carved out a huge chunk of my childhood. So, I mean, I'm loyal. I'm like a Labrador. I'm gonna keep coming back to anything he does. And then afterwards, I kind of cry at the end result. But hey, I mean, anything Van Damme, I'll watch.
Yes. Well, and this one we're going to talk about today is actually one that I wanted to talk with you about, but I was kind of waiting for it to come on one of the free streamers, which it didn't even cross my mind to ask you if maybe you had already rented it or purchased it, because then we could have done it sooner. But it finally ended up on Hulu, so I was like, okay, let me reach out and see. And then, of course, he has another movie coming up on Netflix, or it's already on Netflix, Kill 'Em All 2, which we're going to cover in a later podcast. But for this one, we decided to do Darkness of Man, which we were kind of doing our kind of early chat before we started the podcast. You brought up a really excellent point that the trailer looked really great on this one.
Oh yeah, I mean the trailer is rock solid. I mean, and that's the one thing that I will give credit to. Okay, look, all of those Bruce Willis movies that we got of the past few years. I mean, look, Sylvester Stallone. He doesn't come out of this unscathed. He's done a few of these kind of cheapy productions. He has one that just came out called Armor, right? You know what I mean? And so the thing about these trailers is whoever's cutting them, I think, deserves a lot of credit, because these trailers always, they hook, line, and sinker, man. I mean, they get you. You think, oh wow, this could be something really cool. I mean, because if you just look at the trailer for this film, that's the thing that really sold me. I mean, I had been kind of following this film's production and getting excited, for it. Mainly when I saw the cast. I'm sure we're going to be talking about the cast of this film, but I kind of got my hopes up a bit, and then I saw the trailer. And what's really cool about the trailer is, it shows all the good stuff. Okay, it has Van Damme playing mean and playing burnt out, which is something that he's been doing for the past decade of his career. But what's really cool is the trailer. If you remember, the words flash on screen, one of the greatest action stars of all time. And you see that as a fan and you think, hell yes. In 2024, okay, when this film came out, to see those words pop up on the screen, because let's face it, Van Damme has also pretty much been retired. I think we can say he's been in the semi-retirement. So when you see that he is front and center on a film again, yeah, I mean, one of the greatest action stars of all time, he's back. Especially considering, I mean, he took, like I said, he's been in this semi-retirement. He doesn't pop up for much. The last thing that we really saw him do was that Last Mercenary, which popped up on Netflix, and which wasn't that good. And so, I mean, he took a few years off. To see him back in a film again, doing what we expect him to do, is pretty exciting. You know what I mean? I mean, as soon as I saw that trailer, I was like, oh, that's a day one. I mean, I shamelessly, I'll admit it, man. I did buy this film digitally as soon as it came out. I spent the $14.99 and bought it, hoping for something better than what it was, but no, it was not.
Right. Well, and also too, like, beyond the cast, I mean, first off, Van Damme, like you said, he was kind of in a semi-retirement. But there's a sense when he does something that he really puts a lot more into it. We talked about this when you were on, when we talked about Replicant, how he picks roles that are challenging and they're harder for him. So we knew this wasn't going to be an overweight Seagal sleepwalking his way through, or sitting his way through a movie, right? We figured we'd have something good here. The director, James Cullen Brezak, he actually did a Seagal movie. He did Seagal's last film, Beyond the Law. And I mean, it felt like he was doing his best to jazz that movie up with some cool shots. Zach Ward is someone he works with a lot. He tried to, kind of lean on him a little bit more, because, DMX was just as much, not into it as Seagal. Maybe a little bit more into it than Seagal, but there wasn't a lot there. So I had a sense that, like, maybe, okay, he was going to have something he could sink his teeth into. And then Luc Fontaine, or is it Luc LaFontaine? I think, actually, I'm sure I'm getting his name right. Luc LaFontaine. He was the stunt coordinator for this. He did, movies like Avengement, worked with, people like Jesse V. Johnson, Dan Stiles. When you look at sort of like recent DTV action that's really good, some of the best stuff like Avengement, he's involved with that. So I thought, okay, he's another big name here. But then, of course, I also saw that 145 runtime, and I thought, that's interesting. And it almost feels like this movie, in a way, lives up to that 145 runtime.
Yeah, I mean, You said something on my podcast one time when we were discussing Altitude. You used the term unremarkable.
Yeah,
I
right.
remember, and that's what this film is. It's very unremarkable. I mean, if we could backpedal just a bit. I mean, what's very interesting about Mr. Van Damme, okay, is that, I mean, like I said, he's in this semi-retirement. He doesn't pop up in as much as maybe he used to, right? But what's interesting is I feel like, look, I'm not going to speculate on his finances or anything like that. But we saw the type of films that Bruce Willis was churning out at a crazy rate. We see a lot of the films that Stallone has done of late. You know, like we said, he did that Armor. He did another one, Backtrace, a couple years ago, and those are purely paycheck gigs. I mean, let's be honest, okay? With a guy like Stallone and Bruce Willis and everything, they were they were gifted, I think we can say, millions of dollars for about 2 days worth of work. So when you watch those trailers, you know, and you see that, you know, their second build or whatever, you know going in, okay, at least I'd like to think anybody nowadays knows what's going to happen. But with Van Damme, when he shows up for one of these films, I mean, it's really interesting. It's like, wow, he's stepping out of his semi-retirement and he's picking up something that, you know, seemed worth his while. Okay, and that alone makes you a little bit excited to think, okay, well, if he sees something worthwhile, then I'm gonna check it out as well. I think my biggest frustration with Darkness of Man, to be perfectly honest, is nothing really happens. I mean, if you watch the trailer and you read the synopsis that's on IMDb and everything like that, okay, it has an interesting idea. He's a former Interpol agent who is tasked as being the guardian to a former lover, and something happens to that teenager. Okay, he's kidnapped, and so basically. Is it Russell Hatch? Isn't that his character's name?
That's his character's name. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So the idea is that Hatch is going to have to kind of dig deep within him to kind of rely on those skills that he thought he left behind to get, you know, to get this boy back. Okay. I mean, look, that's a tried and true premise. We've seen it before, but you know, seeing Van Damme kind of, you know, take on like a John Wick type, you know, idea of, you know, of someone who has a beast that's hidden that he's gonna, you know, kind of pull that back out and wreak some damage. Okay, I'm along for the ride. What's very frustrating though is that the kidnapping angle in this film really does not happen until way too late in the film. And so what we're watching is we're just watching Jean-Claude. It's like this bizarre character study that's boring, because all we're doing is we're following Jean-Claude's Hatch character. He's a drunk. He's, you know, he smokes cigarettes like no other, and we're just watching him go to a liquor store and, you know, kind of deal with this. And he's betting Kristana Loken, so obviously he's not really too. He doesn't miss his former lover that much. You know what I mean? And so it's really mundane and weird, because it's like we're watching this film where it's inert. Nothing is really happening. You know what I mean? And it's like, man, they had Van Damme on set clearly for a good chunk of time, and they didn't want to really give us much more. Like,
well, and I think there's a few things for that. I mean, one of them, this is Van Damme's story. And I know in reading some of the trivia that Van Damme and James Cullen Brezak, that's the director, they wanted a more film noir feel. And which is, you know, why we had the voiceovers. We had a lot of Van Damme voiceovers, you know, that kind of thing. And I think they wanted a slow burn approach, because that's what you get in those. But really, when you think of a really good film noir, they don't have as much of a slow burn. Like this was like you said, this was an inert burn, right? This is more like this is a slow burn. It's like a kid trying to get their campfire badge from the Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts, and they can't seem to get that fire lit, right? And you're just watching them rub the sticks together. That's the kind of slow burn this is. And I think that's the one thing, there's too much slow burn. The other thing, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this, like you mentioned Christina Loken, and she, you know, her character, we think she's just like just a woman that Van Damme's hooking up with, and then suddenly, like midway through the film, we find out that she's a vet, not an army vet, but like an actual veterinarian. And it's just kind of a weird thing. And I wonder if, like, between her and some of the other stars that were added to this film, if there was almost like a sense of like, okay, here's our story, here's our script. Oh, we've got Christina Loken, and let's add some pages for her. And we've got whoever else. I'm trying to think. And we get like a very quick one scene cameo for Cynthia Rothrock for people that are seeing that. But I'm wondering, like Spencer Breslin, for example, if when they got him, they added some pages or Sticky Fingers. I think Shannon Doherty and Zach Ward, for example, those are James Cullen Bresek mainstays, who I wonder if maybe he added some pieces for them so he could get them some work to help, because that's kind of, I think he kind of does them a solid if they do him a solid by being in his movies and stuff. And so I'm wondering if that also added to it, is that we had these added pages for these added stars that also kind of weighed the film down. I don't know what your thoughts were on that.
No, I mean, that's, I mean, look, you can't discuss this particular film without looking at the cast that is assembled and how wasted that cast is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, it really is. I guarantee you, Matt, I guarantee you, what happened is the director of this film pretty much went to casting agencies and asked who was available for not even a day,
right,
but 2 hours, okay? And called in some favors, and there you go. I mean, because on paper, okay, it's not an award-winning cast, but it's a very eclectic, interesting cast that anyone who is a fan of B movies, okay, when you read them these names, they're going to perk up a bit, okay? So yeah, you have Sticky Fingers, okay? You have Spencer Breslin, okay, which is really, really weird because he did that movie The Kid with Bruce Willis back in the early 2000s. So you're thinking, okay, that's interesting. Shannon Doherty, Eric Roberts, and Cynthia Rothrock.
I forgot about Eric Roberts. One scene cameo buying tacos from a food truck. I forgot about that one.
What the hell are they doing?
Right.
Like it's literally I had to stop the movie, pause it, and rewind it, and think to myself, what is this? So it's one thing if you're going to have a cameo, fine, but they put these cameos in the film that really do nothing. They certainly don't progress the story along. It's very clear that they're there as favors, but it's weird. You have Eric Roberts shows up as a homeless guy buying a burrito at a taco truck,
right,
and that is it. That is his only scene. He just floats in. And if it was a comedy, that's the other thing too that we should say, Matt, is if this film was a comedy, then I can see maybe that working.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's just weird. You have Cynthia Rothrock comes in at the end of the film. She's the nurse who's tending to Jean-Claude in a hospital bed. Only what's interesting is it's very clear that her and Jean-Claude were not in the same room on the same day of filming, because the way that scene is shot, you can tell that they're in completely different time zones.
Right, and the way Rothrock is acting opposite him, you could tell that she's acting with somebody else in the room, the way she's communicating with him.
Oh, it's crazy. And then, I mean, I will give, look, Shannon Doherty, rest in peace, Shannon Doherty. She gets one scene as a parent, as kind of this uppity parent at the high school where Jean-Claude's surrogate son goes. But I mean, her scene, I guess it's pointless. It could have been left on the cutting room floor. But I mean, I guess her scene is interesting because it does service the plot a little bit, because you do get to see, okay, that the Jean-Claude does care for this kid, even though it's not his biological kid. He is his guardian. He is, and so it's kind of providing like some dialogue between him and Shannon Doherty about his role in this boy's, in Jaden's life, the boy in the film. But again, I mean, you could cut that film, or excuse me, you could cut those scenes, and the film is going to play just fine. It's really, when we talk about inert, it's really puzzling too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, again, I think that's James Cullen Bresek wanting to do Shannon Doherty a solid. I think,
yep.
She's been in a lot of his films, and I think, but you're right. Like, so, yeah, I remember there's a movie I reviewed called Renegades, and I had the screenwriter, Tom Joliffe, on the podcast here, and he talked about how, like, they suddenly were able to get Michael Paré for the movie. And so he was tasked as the screenwriter with coming up with a couple pages for, added the pages in. Well, what they had in that case is that they had an actor who was like also, producer and kind of part of the studio there, Narissa Southcott, who was, she obviously had a really big part in wanting to make the movie work and everything. So he just wrote the scene for her and Michael Pare, and it worked really well. It added some pieces to the film, and I think that's the thing, is you can't just tack things on. You've got to find a way to make these things work organically, and he did a really great job of it in that case, because it did further the plot. Of course, that movie was not an hour and 45 minutes long. It was an hour and a half. But in this case, like you said, the Shannon Doherty thing, like you almost feel like, oh, maybe that could have been a place for romance between, a relationship could have built between Van Damme and Doherty, the way that they were kind of standing there talking to each other. She looked like she was interested in him in some way, but again, it just doesn't go anywhere. Like you said, it's like you get all these little threads that just don't go anywhere.
No, exactly. I mean, exactly. It has a tried and true premise. Okay, badass in hiding. Okay, burnt out, we should say, because Van Damme. That's something that Van Damme is not. He's not a stranger to. Okay, he's been playing kind of burnt out and tired for a long time, I think we could say. So he's relying on that. Okay, fine. So you have a burnt out ex-Interpol agent who again must rely on these skills to get his kid back. Okay, that's fine. But what's really interesting is, I want to stress again, all of that good stuff really doesn't happen until, what would you say, the third act? Is that fair? So the first two acts of this film are pretty much following an ex-Interpol agent around. Okay, because I mean, the thing I will say, I will give Van Damme credit for, is he is front and center in this film. This is his movie. He is not, it's not his stunt double doing all the action and all the, I mean, he is in this movie. Okay, but look, if the idea of following a burnt out ex-Interpol agent, around for about an hour, okay, buying liquor and, picking his kid up from school and everything with nothing happening, if that sounds interesting, then hey, but by all means go for it. But in the end, it's really puzzling that this is what we got. I don't know, man. I when I got done watching this, I was just like, what? Like, this was nothing what the trailer had given us. We get a few fight scenes, you know what I mean, where Van Damme does his punches and things like that. There's a couple shootouts, but you can tell that the shootouts were filmed by someone who, really doesn't have that aesthetic in their wheelhouse, because it's a lot of just close-up shots of Jean-Claude holding a gun and pointing it this way and pointing it that way. It's really frustrating.
Yeah. Well, yeah, especially because of having the stunt coordinator that they had in Luc Lafontaine. Yeah, it is kind of too bad there. And I think again, this idea that they're wanting to go for like a film noir, wanting like Bogey or Double Indemnity or something like that. Like, there are a lot of ways that you can pull that off well that I think they didn't fully embrace. I mean, for example, he's living in an extended stay motel, but it didn't look like an extended stay motel, right? It looked like a room in a house with like pictures and all of these kinds of things. Even Spencer Breslin's room next door, it didn't look like something that you'd want. Like, when I think of film noir, I think of like a sparsely populated room with like little bits of things here and there, colors that and I guess that's the other piece, is that I don't know you can do film noir with when you're shooting on digital. I think that's maybe a hard thing to pull off too, that you've got to but they were going for this, they were going for something. I think they were trying to do something elevated, and it's almost like, instead of elevated, what if you just go with the tried and true, PM Entertainment, every 15 minutes you have an action sequence, and cut it down to 90 minutes, and then mix in the film noir elements. I think sometimes it's better to start small and build than it is to come with a kind of a grand idea and hope you can pull it off.
Well, yeah, I mean, and look, they obviously, Kristana Loken was available. Okay, the Terminatrix from T3.
Yes.
I mean, you know what I mean. Like, you can't deny her presence on film. I mean, she is attractive, and she does have a tough exterior to her, which is really kind of cool. What's again frustrating is, I mean, you can tell that they went to a casting agency. She was a relative name. They saw that she was available. Let's write her in the film, but. Then it's just kind of awkward too, because again, you have it's established that, okay, Van Damme, his character is the guardian of a who's now a teenager, okay, but of this Asian American kid. So I guess Russell Hatch was involved with this kid's mother. on a previous assignment that he was on and everything like that. They were lovers and everything, and then she was killed on a mission. So he has this responsibility to take care of the kid. Okay, that's fine. But if you're going to bring in Kristana Loken, why do you have to make her a love interest? Because then what it does is it's just kind of awkward, because it's like, well, how invested is Van Damme in this kid's life if he's able to move on from the woman who he lost? You know what I'm saying? And so it's frustrating, because you're kind of like, well, if they had to bring in Kristana Loken, why couldn't she have been like, wouldn't this have been cool? Couldn't she been a current Interpol agent, okay, who Jean-Claude is forced to kind of team up with, okay, and then the two of them are kind of working together. They could have done something like that, but no, they make her just this, Van Damme's, piece on the side, you know what I mean? Which doesn't add anything.
Well, not only that, but they tried to split the difference, right? Like, I think she was written in the story as just his piece on the side, and then they realized that they could get Kristana Loken in, and they decide, okay, well, we can get her. Let's make her a veterinarian and add some pages, And so then she's like, coming back to pick up his cat. She's in the stinger after the credits, all of those kinds of things. I think those are things that they tacked on. I mean, the other thing I wonder too is the Shannon Doherty character. If they had beefed up her role, but I wonder too if maybe there was a situation, maybe her health, like this was kind of a last role for her, and her health wouldn't have allowed her to do a bigger part in the film, because that would have made for a little bit more interesting, and also would have tied in the whole Guardian thing. Because the other thing about that whole Guardian piece of this is that he's really just driving the kid around and lecturing him from time to time, but the kid's actually staying with his grandfather. So as the legal guardian, he's not really doing much guarding until like kind of the end, when that kind of comes full circle. So that's the other piece of it too, is that it's sort of not clear who he should be taking care of,
and why he's even still bothering with it. You know what I mean? Like, why he's even, obviously he has this obligation, right. But I mean, again, that the kid doesn't seem too enthused with having Russell in his life, and Van Damme clearly looks at him at the kid as being this obligation. The boy is now a teenager, so it's not like he really needs this person in his life, and so yeah, it's I don't know, man. I know I've said inert, but man, for wanting my hero to have this comeback, which the film was in a lot of ways kind of touted as being, and then you watch the final product, and you're kind of like, again, what did I watch? Because it was really just boring. A former ex-Interpol agent, that idea right there should be really cool, pretty exciting, but no, it's not. I mean, what's interesting is he goes into the store. There's a scene where he goes into the liquor store, foils these toughs who are coming in and trying to rough the owner of the place up a bit. Okay, so that's kind of like the hard to kill moment, right? Where right. It's supposed to establish that he's a badass and he's tough, but again, you have Van Damme. He's pretending to be drunk. Okay, which I guess is pretty funny, but those toughs really don't add much really to the plot. They're not really connected. I don't remember. I don't think are they connected to the big final bad guys at the end?
They're connected to the Russians. One of them was played by Nicolas Cage's son, Weston. And then the other one was Christos Andrews, who has been in some other James Cullen Brezak, Bruce Willis movies. I think one of them was like Surviving the Game. He's essentially, if James Cullen Brezak can't get Chad Michael Murray, he gets Christos Andrews to play that. So again, it was just a couple names that he knew. Weston Cage probably. Yeah, I mean, I imagine he's probably worked with Weston Cage on these movies before too. So it's a couple names he knew. They're going to play these Russian toughs, because that's the idea. It's supposed to be that there's a gang war, that the Russians are moving in on the Koreans, and then the Koreans, they essentially use Van Damme to do their dirty work by, using this child, using Jaden. But yeah, it was, again, it was just more of this idea of like, okay, we've got some names, let's just stick them in here, kind of thing. And I think it's one of those things where you can have as many names as possible, but I don't know. It's almost better to just have a bunch of nameless stunt people getting thrown around a liquor store, just for the sake of, just do it, just to have it, as opposed to have it be a name who then gets doubled, and then we see the name lying on the floor, kind of thing.
I mean, yeah, I mean, look, the whole gang war angle is something again that we've seen, before. But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, man. I feel foolish admitting this, but the mission that he was on, where the woman that he loved, Jaden's mom, where she died, that was a completely unrelated mission that isn't really related to the plot of the entire movie at all, right?
Well, it is and it isn't. So essentially, at the very end, when the loose ends start flying together, then you find out that yes, that essentially, I believe, spoiler alert for people. Maybe I'll put a spoiler at the beginning of this, but it's Jaden's grandfather, which I shouldn't say spoiler alert because they're kind of leading up to it. But yeah, that his grandfather and his the brother, or her brother, the woman's brother, they were the ones who killed her. So they but earlier, right? For the most part, you don't really see a connection, and then at the end, it's just sort of like there's that scene. Remember that scene at the very end where Van Damme goes to confront the old man, and the old man just starts telling him everything, just in one of those
Right.
deals of like, here's all that. It's like you had an hour and 45 minutes to get this stuff in, and you couldn't get any of this in, so we've got to do put on your safety goggles because all the loose ends are flying together kind of scene, that they put in there. So yeah, I mean, it's a, like you said, it's from a story standpoint, it's very easy to check out on this one because it is like it's a long like the story itself is kind of convoluted. Like when he starts taking out the Russian mobsters because he's looking for Jaden, it was never really clear to me that he should have thought that the Russian mobsters had Jaden. Like it didn't make any sense. And so a lot of that stuff at the end, it just doesn't. Again, it just feels like it was pages that were tacked on to a script, and they weren't really always going everywhere.
Well, obviously, I'm glad I'm talking about it with you because do you see what little impression it made on me? Like a lot of that stuff completely like kind of went over my head a bit. I'll shamelessly admit I kind of tuned down on some of it just because it was kind of like a lot of that stuff just comes in at such a clip near the end that you're kind of like, well, what in the hell was the past hour leading up to this? You know what I mean? Like it's very frustrating. And then for the film to have the audacity to end, okay, with a stinger scene
Right.
of Jean-Claude, Christina Loken, and this Jaden kid enjoying a piece of pie at a diner. Okay, I guess it's, there's nothing wrong with a happy ending. Okay, that's fine. But it's weird. I guess we're supposed to find solace in the fact that, they've created this kind of makeshift family when it seemed to me like Jaden was doing okay without.
Right. Well, so, here's an interesting thing because we're talking about this convoluted plot here, right? So this is an hour 45 minutes and it doesn't make any sense. One of the last movies that we talked about, Replicant, it's about the same length as this. It's hour and 40 minutes, versus hour 45. Obviously, it's directed by Ringo Lam, who's, he's much more accomplished than James Cullen Brezak. And then, it also starred Michael Rooker, so really great co-star. But that plot is pretty convoluted, right? The idea is that there's a serial killer who was abused by his mother, so he's killing mothers while the babies are in their cribs nearby. And there's a secret government project that allows you to, if you've got some DNA from this killer, you can clone him, and that clone will have a psychic connection to the killer, and that's how they find him. That sounds so, like that seems impossible to follow. Yet Replicant was much easier to follow than this movie, I think. And so I think it shows that like if you know what you're doing, if you no matter how ridiculous the idea is, if you are committed to the bit, right? If you're committed to the idea and the actors are committed because they know to be committed to it because it's cohesive and it all kind of fits the way it's supposed to, you can pull it off. Because I think we would agree like Replicant was a better movie than this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the thing that we need to point out, which I think it goes without saying, is look, Replicant was made at a time when these direct-to-video films had a lot more in terms of budget. They also had a lot more in terms of shooting days and everything. So they had a kind of a lot more, in the vestibule, if you will, to kind of, to kind of work with. You know what I mean? And so that's why I think the story is much more coherent and cohesive. With a film like this, look, the budget really, there's no way this film could have been made for more than a couple million, you know what I mean? And so I'd be willing to bet that most of that is going to the stars' salaries. So when you have that, what do you really have left to work with? Okay, I mean, you really can't do much in terms of action sequences, and what action sequences you can do, well, you gotta kind of, do those really on the cheap, okay, and do a lot of like I said, that shootout sequence that we see. I mean, that right there, you can tell that it was being filmed where, okay, one guy was shooting his gun here, one guy is shooting, then they're stopping the camera, moving to the other guy, he's going to shoot his gun, and then they're putting those two scenes, they're splicing them together when it's apparent that it seems like they weren't even on the same soundstage at the same time. You know what I mean? It just it feels really, really clunky in a lot of ways, and I don't know if Jean-Claude is really the best. I mean, look, if he's not going to be in the room for someone else to act off of, I don't think he's the best person.
Right.
I think a guy like Jean-Claude, you need to be in the room to be kind of working alongside him, because I mean, there's so much, he emotes so much in his face. I will say, the older that he's gotten, okay, his face has gotten much more weathered and his eyes have gotten droopy. He's very, very interesting, I think, to look at in his older age. But if he's not going to be there and you're kind of, working alongside, someone who's supposed to be him and everything, then it's really going to come out very, very awkward and not sincere,
Yeah, no, I totally agree there. Now, interesting. So, according to IMDb, this movie cost $5 million to make. Now,
okay.
Will from Exploding Helicopter reminds me every time I mention a budget on IMDb that it is crowdsourced. So it doesn't necessarily mean that. Now, there were, I believe, am I right? There were 8 production company animations at the beginning of this film.
Oh, I've talked about that on my show before. You and I talked about that. The Family Guy joke. The Family Guy joke.
Exactly.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is I'd be willing to bet, like, okay, I can't remember all the companies, but like, I'd be willing to bet like this was the only movie that they did. Like this is the only film that for many of those companies that will ever see that logo again.
Yeah.
And you almost have to wonder. Look, I don't want to speculate, but I mean, you almost have to wonder when like 8 to 9 production logos flash at the beginning of the film. You kind of wonder like, okay, is there something going on behind the scenes here?
Right.
Like, what kind of tax write-offs are they doing? Like for that many logos to flash, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the also known as in the it definitely like the one that comes up on IMDb. Now you have to page down to find it when you click on other names, but it's definitely the Russian name. So I do wonder, especially with I'm trying to think if that would have been around the time. I guess that would have been close to the time, right? Of when Russia invaded the Ukraine and suddenly all of the sanctions were happening and all the oligarchs' money was being frozen. I could definitely see maybe a couple of these being laundering operations. I mean, we know Randall Emmett, right? That was I think in that article about him that it came out, right, that he was using some of those movies to launder Russian oligarch money. I think wasn't that in that article with about him with Bruce Willis?
I mean, he's. I mean, let's just say it. He's a pretty terrible person all around, and so yeah. I mean, he was abusive to employees and was just there's allegations of drug use and everything like that. So, I mean, yeah, I think he was using those films in particular. It's very evident that those films were fronts for something a little more nefarious. This film, I mean, it's frustrating because I came in and I really, really wanted to like it. I really did. But unfortunately, it doesn't do nearly as much with its premise as you're kind of hoping when you hear it's relatively simplistic and basic premise. It doesn't do as much with that as you would hope, and in the end, you're left with a film that it really just kind of lays there. I mean, Van Damme did a film, I'm trying to think, about 7 years ago or so, I'd say, called The Butcher. Did you see that film, The Butcher?
Oh, I don't. Did it have a different name as well?
Well, it's a French film, so most of it is in French. But that one is very, very interesting because it's another low budget film. Okay, the premise isn't much. It's again he's playing tired and he's playing burnt out. Okay, but it's where he is the or not the butcher.
Oh,
the bouncer.
Yes,
the
I
bouncer,
did. Yes, that's a good one. Yes, I enjoyed
Sorry
that.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah. But what in that one he's a bouncer at a club, and he pretty much runs afoul of these gang gang members because he accidentally kills a guy one night at a club, and it pretty much his daughter is getting threatened, and he, you know, once again he has to rely on these skills and you know, tear some shit up. It's, you know, look, it's not the greatest film, but what's interesting is that one, it plays within its wheelhouse, and it does what you would expect when you hear that premise and when you hear that Jean-Claude is involved. It does what it should do, what you'd expect. This film really doesn't even have that much fun with its simplistic premise. You know what I mean?
No, it tries to do too much. It tries to be this like slick film noir that, you know, I think I don't know how well you could pull off a good film noir in the modern environment. Like you said, you know, the budgets are really bad. I mean, again, you know, the fact that I was just saying this movie was shot for $5 million. The only thing I can think of that would have made the budget go up that much beyond the names that we get in this is maybe the shooting locations, because it was shot in Los Angeles. Could that have also bumped the price up? That maybe, you know, these actors they wanted to be in LA because it was also shot in Santa Clarita. But yeah, I think it tries. It definitely, you know, kind of the Icarus thing where it really tried to reach for the sun, but also with some of those decisions, you're like, well, why would you think that would be a good way to reach for the sun? I guess so. It's a combination of those things, right? Of like, it tries to do too much, but also why were you doing that too much?
I mean, and look, the other thing too that we need to address. I mean, it's kind of the elephant in the room. Is, look, guys like, I mean, we mentioned Stallone doing a lot of those shoddy DTV films, you know, Bruce Willis and everything. Dolph Lundgren is he's guilty of it as well. You know, who will do a film where he's a supporting character, and the few scenes that he gets, he's either sitting or he's laying down, pretending to be wounded.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you're kind of like, what the hell? You know what I mean? But I think the thing that we need to, you know, recognize is that they're old men, okay? Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it is something I kind of echoed, and I said something similar in an essay that I wrote for that book on Van Damme. But it's kind of like, as fans of these guys, okay, we're wishing and we're hoping for something that just isn't possible in this day and age. Okay, as much as I would love to see a Jean-Claude Van Damme or a Dolph Lundgren have their own John Wick type movie, they can't do it. I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, and to be fair, I guess, you know, Keanu Reeves is also, you know, pretty old as well. But I mean, they can't do it. And I think the other thing too is those opportunities just are not coming across their desk. I'm sure that Van Damme would love to have his own John Wick type movie. Okay, I'm sure that he's probably praying for one. But the fact remains, it's really crazy. But you know, I don't think their value, okay, especially to certain markets, is what it once was. So a lot of these production companies don't want to bother, and so, you know, at the end of the day, Van Damme, he's a working guy like everybody else is. Well, he's going with what he's been given, okay, and a project comes across his desk, okay, that has his asking price, his number of shooting days and everything. It looks like it might be interesting, and the money is there, you know what I mean? They have the money up front. I think he's pretty much of the mindset where he's like, all right, let's just do it. You know what I mean? And I think in the end, the ones who suffer the most, to be honest, are fans, because we want something, okay, it's kind of, my buddy Steve said it perfectly. It's almost like us as fans, we're victims of domestic violence in a lot of ways, okay? We love the celebrity, we love the star, and we just keep going back, hoping it's going to be different. And it's not. You know what I mean?
Well, I will say with this one, though, it sounds like this was Van Damme's idea. He had this story, and it sounds like he went to James Cullen Brezak, or I don't know if he went to him directly, or if maybe he was connected with him through some of these production companies or whatever. And it sounds like James Cullen Brezak took Van Damme's idea and tried to make it into something more. So it sounds like this was maybe a passion project for Van Damme, which I think is what's interesting about this with Van Damme is that you're right about the, you know, just doing the projects for the money. I think, you know, I think every time you're on, it's almost like a check it off the bingo card that I've got to mention your interview with Ben Sachs. But But one of the best parts about that is because he talks a lot about that, he's working with Seagal. And, if you look at Seagal's, especially those Keone Waxman directed movies, a lot of them he was the line producer on. And he talked about how, like, Seagal's people would come to him and say, hey, I need a couple $1 million. Can we make another movie? And, I think he said to him at one point, he's like, hey, listen, we're making too many movies. The audience isn't there anymore. You're losing the audience because you're making too many of these to try to make money. And Van Damme's the opposite, right? Like, he doesn't just go to a line producer and say, hey, I need a couple $1 million. Can you get me a movie? He's more like, okay, I've been working on this script. I want to make this movie. What is that other one? The Eagle Path, that he never made, right? Like, it never was completed. That it was sort of this passion project. And it seems like it's hard. It's like, what is the one that works the best? Is something in the middle, right? Something that's not a full-on passion project where you can't, take a lot of input and make it into something a little bit cleaner and easier, versus the sleepwalking through the moneymaker, right? The I Need a New Kitchen Island movie. It's like Van Damme is almost at this point where he's like, I'm just going to make the movie I want to make. We're going to be talking about a Kill 'Em All 2 coming up here, which I have to assume that was also something where he was like, I want to do something more with this character. It's a real fascinating thing because, I guess when you're at the level of Van Damme, if you can get the money to make your movie, I guess that's fantastic. But for us as the audience, to your point about us kind of having to sit through these movies when we're hoping for something more exciting, you'd like somebody involved to be able to say, like, hey, you know what, these scenes aren't working. We need to do something else here. And these scenes aren't working in the script phase because you don't have the money to reshoot it. Maybe that's the other part of it. Maybe they thought this script looked fantastic, and then when they got to the reality of shooting it on that budget, maybe they were kind of stuck. I don't know.
That could be it. That could be it. Look, there's nothing wrong with an actor trying something out of their wheelhouse. Yeah. You know what I mean? Look, I know a lot of these stars have tried comedy and, with varying degrees of success, you know what I mean? So if Jean-Claude wanted to do his own film noir, his own Memento, if you will, yeah. Okay, you know what I mean? I'll go along with that, that's fine. And I'm not expecting him to do the splits in every movie or do his signature roundhouse kick in every movie. It would be great if he did, but okay, if he wants to branch out, fine. But no, you're exactly right. It's almost like it feels like there needs to be someone on set, okay, who's looking at these films and who's saying, like, guys, you're bread and butter, okay? These fans, okay, the Matts and the Seans of the world, okay, they're expecting something from you. And if you're going to be on set, if you're going to have, it's one thing if you only have the star on set for a day or two, okay? But Van Damme, he was on set with this, so it's kind of like you said, I wish someone was on set and they said, you know what, like, we need to put in another shootout sequence here, or we need to excise a lot of the talky banter scenes inside the diner. You know what I mean? How many conversations were there between Russell and Jaden about, how your mom died and my job is to protect you. You know what I mean? We had that conversation at least 3 times. You know what I mean? Like, things like that. It's kind of like, They could have cut that. They could have, cleaned it up a bit. I don't really know what's going on. It's interesting because at the end of the day, they're all getting paid, but what's sad is these films, no way are they making what they used to. Even when the DVD market was huge and people were renting these films in the stores, you at least had that market to kind of bank on. But now, look, it's on Hulu. So that's how most people are watching it now. You know what I mean? And so it's kind of like, look, they got paid, but at the same hand, like, I don't know, fans want, you know what I mean? I want a little bit more, you know what I mean? I hate going on one of these films and not, and leaving disappointed, but at the end, what's interesting about Jean-Claude too is, look, we talk about the semi-retirement that he's in. I honestly think that he doesn't need to work. Right. Again, I don't know what his finances are, but I get the vibe that he's totally cool resting on his laurels and being remembered for, like, Bloodsport and things like that. We see him, he's been really kind of, marketing, like, his older stuff lately in various commercials and selling, his likeness for the Hitman video game and things like that. So I think he would be okay financially if he just, quit and was relying on that. But the fact that he's, still at it and does, one film every 3 years, then you'd think, I mean, man, if you're only going to do one film every 3 years, then wouldn't you have the some people on set to make sure that it's going to deliver? You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I mean, for example, we've got Luc LaFontaine as the fight coordinator and the stunt coordinator, who's done some of the best DTV stuff that's come out recently. Some of those really great Jesse V. Johnson ones, like Avengement. So it's like, okay, we've got this guy. Let's do some great scenes. So, there's a pretty decent scene where he fights, some people. It's kind of these like quick scenes though, where he's just kind of beating some people up outside of a back alley or something.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, maybe you need to insert like a big sequence here and there and let Luc Fontaine cook, as the kids say. Let him put it together. And if you feel like, okay, Van Damme maybe doesn't have it in him in his early 60s to do the sequence the way that maybe Luc LaFontaine has it set or ready to do it. It's almost like, okay, if we can't get him, what if we have some other people, some other stunt people do the scene and just give us something exciting? I mean, it's like, you watch a PM Entertainment movie and they're just like, oh, it's a kid's movie, but let's just have a car chase where a police car flips over. Like, we're just going to do that, And I think this movie needed more of that. And I almost wonder if Van Damme thought it would have been too crass to do more of that. But then again, it's like, what do we the fans want? And that's what we want to see. Luc LaFontaine bring it. We want to see Avengement kind of stuff. That's what we're here for. And we get it here or there, but we don't get enough of it.
Or better yet, too, I mean, look, we see this a lot in like a lot of these low budget DTV type films. Is, okay, look, if they only have 5 million to work with and they only have so many days, well then, in my opinion, make it have it a one set location.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Have like one, like a if it all took place at that rundown motel. You know what I mean? And then it could become like a bit of a siege thriller where Jean-Claude is caught between these two gangs who have pretty much taken over the place, and he has to kind of sort out his alliances and things like that. I think if they had done something like that, then yeah, they certainly could have put, they're only working with one set. So theoretically, if that's the case, then yeah, they could have put some of the money towards, towards some action sequences and maybe spent more time on the choreography. And then if they really had to bring Cynthia Rothrock in, okay, then have her come in as like one of the police, as the hostage negotiator or something like that real quick. I mean, something like that. They could have done that as well. But if you think about it, for a low budget film, it covers a lot of ground.
Yes.
You have him, he's outside of the school in one scene. There's a lot of scenes where he's driving from point A to point B. He's going into the liquor store. He's in the shootout on the previous mission. Okay, the back alleys. You know what I mean? They could have eliminated a lot of that and just had that, you know what I mean? Had that one set and then really done something with that. Because if you think about it, like, I've brought this up on my show numerous times, but, the film Evil Dead, which, classic horror film, okay, well, I'm not going to go off on that, but that was made on like a razor thin budget. And so it all takes place in that cabin, right? But what happens is, in my opinion at least, that cabin becomes a character in itself. And they really work around that. They could have done that, you know what I mean? Especially considering he lives in that motel. You know what I mean? Like, now I'm thinking about it, that could have been really cool. And maybe there could have been a scene where he finds a weapon stash at the bottom of the motel that he had been hiding, and he decides, okay, now it's time to bring this out. Yeah. Hey, look, I mean, that's something.
I totally agree, because you think of some of the best hotels, like the movie Drive with Mark Dacascos, where they have the hotel shootout and explosion and all that. And I think in that case they had an old hotel. I mean, that's another piece of this, right? Is that I think because they were shooting in LA, they were spending a lot of money on that. But if you have a hotel set, and then I've never really taken, I think is it I-5 that goes between LA and Vegas, or I-10, one of the interstates that goes through there. There's got to be tons of old motels that nobody goes to anymore, right? There's got to be tons of, just grab one of those and blow it up. Just destroy it, right?
And what that does too is that really, if this takes place in LA, well, then that really kind of makes the city of LA seem almost seedier. it kind of lending to the theme of, darkness of man. You know what I mean? They could have done something, something really cool with that. And then you're kind of getting into maybe it's a bit of a trope, but where Jean Claude is, I thought I left the war behind back in my previous job, and here it is back home. You know what I mean? Like something like that. But in the end, I think it's I would say, and I've said this on my show too. It seems like there's a missed opportunity, but I don't know if they had too many opportunities to begin with that they were presented with. You know what I mean? They maybe they weren't working with much, and they just figured, well, let's do the best that we can. Because again, like I said, if this was $5 million, I guarantee you, a lot of that budget had to go to the stars' salaries. It really did. I mean.
Yeah. Well, because also I think, and I'll say quickly, it's I-15 that connects LA and Vegas. So sorry, I want to make sure before anybody comments there that that's that was the connection there. But I believe that every single star, every single name star in this film has a production credit as well.
Yep.
Yeah, and of course that's another technique, isn't it? Right, that they you can kind of pay them more by or I don't know exactly how that works, but it seems to be a hallmark of these kinds of movies, right? That everybody who is a star is a producer. Actually, I don't see if I see Cristiano Loken here as a star. I mean, obviously Van Damme is a producer, but yeah, actually that's funny. I'm looking through. I mean, there's a ton of producers listed here, but actually I don't see any of the other stars in the movie listed. So that's weird, because you'd think when you get that many producers that usually all the stars get in on that action.
Yeah, I mean, and it feels almost kind of shady in a lot of ways, kind of going like what we were talking about earlier, is then you kind of wonder like, okay, well then not only are they getting paid, but if they're a producer, if they're taking on that role, well then they're also going to be getting more, because they're probably using it as tax write-off purposes.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so like it feels, I don't know, it feels a little dark, pun intended, that
Yes.
that's going on. I mean, and so yeah, man. I mean, it's really interesting because if we going back to Replicant real quick, Replicant that was the first film that went direct to video. I mean, I guess you could say Legionnaire, but when Replicant went direct to video, it was very clear that it was like, wow, okay, he's the days of Jean-Claude leading a theatrical film are over.
Right.
But then if you look at a film like Replicant, and he followed Replicant up with The Order, he did The Order, then he did In Hell. Okay, if you look at those films and then compared to this, there is no denying, and granted that those films are over 20 years ago, I get that, but it's just kind of weird to think how a film 20 years ago just looks so much better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, that's the thing too, is you could say, look, the digital filmmaking, I don't think the digital filmmaking does these films any favors too, but these films just look so cheap. They really do. They don't even feel like movies to an extent. You know what I mean? They almost feel like glorified TV movies or something that, you'd be seeing premiering on YouTube or the internet or something. Those films that he was doing back in that early 2000s period, yeah, they weren't working with the budgets of Time Cop and Sudden Death, but they still felt like movies. You know what I mean? And these just, I don't think there's anything really more I can say at this at this point.
Yeah, it's one of those things we talk about a lot, right? That there's one of the things that Randall Emmett did to the direct-to-video film industry, at least in America, is he really turned it into this churn and burn, like mass-produced, what's the term, assembly line approach. It's either originally it was shoot in Bulgaria, shoot in Romania, and pump the films out there. But then when it became cheap to shoot in like Michigan or Louisiana or Alabama, they started making them there. And then it's almost like they all want to do this approach. And I think the movies look bad, right? They don't look as good because there's not a lot that's done with them. But then it's Also, for the crew involved, it feels like, I don't know what this movie was like. It's, you hope they were treated better, but you read about with Randall Emmett, right? That the crew would sometimes have to sleep like 4 in a room to get these movies made. You hope maybe that's part of the reason why the budget's higher here, is that you hope that some of that money went to the crew. But it's a real cynical way of making movies, and even though this one here doesn't have quite that level of cynicism that say like a Bruce Willis one does, where like I think the way you termed it is the best, where it was just Randall Emmett essentially like Bela Lugosi with Ed Wood. That's the way he kind of got Bruce Willis Studios, and we found out that was even worse than we thought. When you watch that Randall Emmett documentary, but to your point that you made earlier about how it's us fans who lose out on this, that this sort of cynical approach, that even in this film that doesn't feel as cynical, it still feels so much cheaper than those movies we watched 20 years ago. Replicant, according to IMDb, has a budget of $17 million. So that should give you a sense of like how much more money that and again, because they knew if we put Replicant out on DVD, we know that Blockbuster, Hollywood Video, whoever else, they're going to buy 4 or 5 copies of it. And how many Blockbusters or Hollywood Videos are there in the country? So they knew they were going to make that money back just from those DVD rentals.
No, look, I don't even want to. I feel bad even putting Darkness of Man on the same wavelength as those Bruce Willis films, because I feel like those films, the sole goal with those films was purely to make money. Okay, and they just were completely, like, each one was shittier than the last. They were pretty much made on an assembly line, I feel. You know what I mean? Like, okay, get one film out. Okay, what script do we have lying around? Is Chad Michael Murray available? Oh, he's not? Well, let's get Mark Paul Gosselaar instead. You know what I mean? And just quickly pump it out. Okay, and then the next one comes through. You know what I mean? And those ones were, they all followed the same MO. I don't think this one is as egregious as that, but it really is unfortunate, because I like how you said that it has the aspirations to be a film noir. Even if you look at the poster, it's very clear that they were going for like kind of like a Humphrey Bogart type angle with it. If you look at the poster, it just kind of has that, but again, it also comes off as being a kind of a cheaper, inferior Temu version of the actual thing. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, because that's the problem, right? Is that those we forget, because we think about the fact that technology has gotten so much better. But when we think of technology being so much better, we think of it more in terms of like Marvel movies. That you obviously could not make Avengers in Endgame or whatever in 1941, but the actual like film that they were shooting on in 1941, even if it was just black and white, it looks nicer. And of course, there's a lot of these movies have gone through various restorations to make them look nicer. But I can remember even like renting the VHS of like Maltese Falcon or Casablanca or something like that, and just being like, wowed by how great it looks. And I think that's one of the problems where technology has hurt the movie industry, is that because of this sort of the digital effect, and again, it's to save money, right? So James Cullen Brezak, he can shoot everything at like a certain color and just blend it all together, so he can shoot any time of day, and he doesn't have to worry about how the light is if I shoot at 4 p.m. versus 6 a.m. or something like that. And so it's just another way to save money, but you lose something in the quality when you do that.
Yeah. No, I'm as we're talking right now, I'm reading the synopsis on IMDb, and it sounds electric. It sounds like it could be something pretty cool, but man, it should not be as ultimately inert and boring as it came out. But look, hey, let's be perfectly honest. The next thing that Jean-Claude, I'm trying to look right now what he has lined up. Because obviously he did Kill 'Em All 2. That one he did pretty quickly. But what else does he have coming up? He did a French action comedy called The Gardener. So he has that one, and then at the moment he doesn't really have anything on deck on slate. He has one that's called What's My Name, and another called Silent Kill, but the more I've read about those films, I think those films are kind of dead in the water. I don't think they're going to happen.
Yeah.
So
it looks like Silent Kill was directed. It was originally directed by the late Anthony Hickok.
Yeah.
So, and he's passed away. So I don't know if another director has picked it up from him.
Yeah, that's not happening. The What's My Name was going to be written by the guy who did the movie Green Book.
Right. Ballalonga.
What was that his name?
Yeah, I think so. Because he does movies with Christian Sesma, who, Christian Sesma has done some direct-to-video stuff. He does kind of like slightly better direct-to-video stuff, Christian Sesma. And yeah, Nick Vallelonga will sometimes appear in his movies.
Yeah. But that's not going to happen either. I'm just looking at that one.
Yeah.
I think that one's dead in the water too. So again, I think we'll probably see Mr. Jean-Claude go into hibernation for about another 3 years or so. And look, we can hope that that the next thing he does is going to be better. But the thing that we also have to realize too is when that happens, he's also going to be another 2-3 years older.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, yeah. Well, what I really wish would happen, and unfortunately it's not, but I mean, look, I think it would be awesome if they cast him in one of those John Wick movies. I mean, obviously they cast Scott Adkins and Marco Zarrar, who were amazing, don't get me wrong. But I think it would have been really cool if they cast him. You know, they're doing that Running Man remake with Glenn Powell and Josh Brolin.
Oh, yes.
You know what I mean? I think, look, if they really want to get people excited about a remake of this film, I think cast guys like Dolph Lundgren and Jean-Claude Van Damme as the Stalkers. You know what I mean? As Buzzsaw or Sub-Zero, or maybe they're going to have some crazy new ones that we don't know about. But I think cast guys like Jean-Claude in those particular roles. But unfortunately, we know that's not going to happen. And well, maybe I shouldn't say with such certainty, but it would be really cool if it did happen. But if I had to bet on it, I don't see it happening personally. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but
no.
I think that'd be pretty cool. That's the best place I think these guys can go at this point. I guess, let me rephrase that. That's if they want to service their fans and make fans like you and I happy, I think that's the best option at this point. But I don't see it happening, sadly.
No, I agree. I mean, it's interesting when you mention Keanu Reeves because they're only 4 years apart. Van Damme's only 4 years older than him, which I guess when you're in your 60s, those 4 years can, they can be a lot at that point. But I think out of all of those names, I mean, part of it too is he's younger, right? I think he's 3 years younger than Dolph. I think was Dolph born in 57, right. And then of course, I mean, we don't know. Nobody knows exactly how old Seagal is. He was born in 51 when I started my blog in 2007. He's since been moved up to 1952. Who knows? At some point on IMDb, he'll go up to 1953 that he'll have been born at some point. But nobody really knows exactly how old he is. But I think of Charles Bronson doing the Death Wish movies into his 70s. And it maybe, with Van Damme, maybe that's the transition that he's got to make, is that it's that kind of movie, a Death Wish kind of film where it's short and sweet, and he can kind of use his screen presence as a way to, and he can have occasional fight scenes with guys, but really it's more about like just sitting there and like knowing that he's a badass, and then maybe he just like has a 2x4 with a nail in it and he puts in a guy's head or something like that, something like really, really gross, but like that kind of movie. Because you're right. I mean, he's not getting any younger. You definitely could see it in this one. I think in was it Pound of Flesh, where he was completely naked in that one, showing off that he was like still in great shape. I think he knows now at 64 that he's not quite able to pull that off anymore. Another actor who's about the same age as Gary Daniels, born in 63, kind of a similar deal. I think he's kind of he's staying in really great shape. He's doing everything he needs to do to keep himself in shape. Or I shouldn't say everything, because he's not doing what Stallone's doing, right? He's not doing the HGH as far as we know, or the Botox or any of that stuff. But it is one of those things where it's like, we kind of have to accept that, like, yeah, we're kind of, these guys are getting older, and, these guys didn't do movies like this when they were this age, 20, 30 years ago. I mean, Bronson doing the movies he was doing, that was a big deal that he was that old. So, I guess, I don't know if you necessarily have to temper, maybe we have to temper our expectations, but I also think with Darkness of Man, I don't know if we can let it off the hook by tempering our expectations, because I think there's still more that movie could have done even if it wasn't, Van Damme in really great fight scenes or something.
Yeah, I think my concern with, and it's a light concern because these guys are living comfortably than us, obviously, but my concern with guys like this going down that road and doing, going the Charles Bronson route and doing films that just continue to get crappier and everything. My concern with that is that it's going to devalue their brand and make their brand seem like a joke. You know what I mean? I mean, let's be honest. I know that Bruce Willis had some health issues and everything like that, but I mean, the sheer number of films that he was putting out. I mean, there's no denying that it did tarnish his image. I think, in my opinion, okay, it no longer, made him seem as cool, at least in my opinion, as he once did. You know what I mean? So I guess that's my concern. If they're going to continue doing, films that are just of such a low quality, then it's going to, you're going to kind of look at them as being has-beens and everything like that. I guess the counter argument to that, though, is that, look, these are not mainstream films that mainstream audiences are going to be seeing. You know what I mean? I'd be willing to bet that no one else at my work, Matt, has seen Darkness of Man or even knows that it exists. Yes. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, so, I mean, I guarantee if I talk to people at my work, they would know who Jean-Claude is. They could probably name Bloodsport or whatever. But if I mention a film like Darkness of Man or Kill 'Em All 2, they're going to have no idea what in the hell I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Because these films just simply don't hit the radar of the general public anymore. It's people like us that are seeing them, and then we leave pissed off, and then we go on podcasts and talk about them for an hour. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So. Yeah. Well, right. You get that response from people like, "Oh wow, Van Damme still makes movies. Wow, I haven't thought about him since the '90s." Yeah. Right.
But I'm not going to watch it. Right. I mean, let's be honest. That's the reaction. It's someone who's scrolling through Hulu, okay, trying to find the next show. They'll say, "Oh, Van Damme, I remember him. What's this one?" Right. Okay, but they're not going to watch it. You know what I mean? They're not going to bother.
No, and the other factor that's interesting is I'm wondering with this IMDb, with all the names that are in this, if there's almost like an IMDb. I don't know if hack is the right term, because I know kids call everything a hack nowadays, but if you think about it, right? Like, okay, let's say I'm on Cynthia Rothrock's IMDb page, and I look at what she's got going on, and I see this movie come up, and I click on it. It's like, oh wow, Van Damme's in this too. And, Cynthia Rothrock and Van Damme in a movie? All right, I'm going to check that out. And I guess I'm trying to think of who else, you could do that with. I mean, probably there's not like people checking out Spencer Breslin, but maybe. You never know, right? Maybe somebody is like, oh, what is that Spencer Breslin up to? I haven't seen him in a while. Or Zach Ward, right? It's like you're watching A Christmas Story, right, on TBS on Christmas Day. Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, and you start looking through the cast on IMDb between your fourth and fifth time watching the movies, and you go, oh, what is everybody up to here? Oh, Zach Ward. Oh, no way, Zach Ward's doing a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie? Oh, that's interesting. And to your point, I wonder like what the percentage would be of people who do that, who then decide they want to watch it. Like I'm sure probably the Cynthia Rothrock ones are more likely to do it than the Zach Ward Christmas Story on Christmas Day ones. Like depending on who's going to find it. I mean, Nick Diaz is in this. I don't know if anybody would look him up. What you're going to see him do a UFC event or something and find him on there. I don't know, but it's another one of these approaches that it feels hacky, right? That you're just going to put a bunch of names in and see if people find them on IMDb. But it's another element of this modern movie age that I think hurts the quality of movies versus making them better.
But here's what's really, really interesting. Okay, you mentioned Cynthia Rothrock, okay? But I follow her on her various socials and everything like that. She will, any vacation she takes, okay, God bless her, because she can still do a lot of the moves and everything, but any vacation she takes, all conventions that she goes to, I mean, she is very heavily involved in her social media. But when this movie came out, do you think she promoted it?
Right, no.
No, she did not. I mean, she did not even. In fact, a buddy of mine, Steve, he actually on her post, she was mentioning she's been heavily promoting some film that some Western martial arts Western, Black Creek. Yeah, she's been heavily promoting that one. But he asked her basically on her social, "Hey, when is Darkness of Man coming out?" And she basically said like, "Don't bother, I'm barely in it." You know what I mean? And that's one of the stars. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
Right. It's it's funny. We only think that like Madam Web, things like that, have that kind of situation, right? Where like Dakota Johnson's just killing the movie on Saturday Night Live. But you're right. Like this happens. I mean, I remember was it Submerged, the Seagal movie? Somebody asked Gary Daniels about his being in that. He's like, I don't talk about that movie. And so it's like, yeah, it's like But you're right. Like, and I guess that's part of it, right? Is that in a way, Cynthia Rothrock, if you're a fan enough of her, right, that you would go to her IMDb or to her socials and ask her or see that somebody's asked her, then right, okay, she's not in the movie much, I don't care. I mean, obviously, when I review this movie, it's going to be another tag for her, which it's like a big thing on my site is how many tags the different names get. Of course, Dolph has the most. He's the only one who has more tags, more movies reviewed than he has years on the planet. He's the only one who's he's got like 70 something movies, but Rothrock is up there. She's like in the upper 40s, and so when I do review this on the site, she's going to get a tag for her one moment, and she's also she's a Hall of Famer on the site, so I've got to kind of give her her own paragraph and be like, yeah, she was barely in this movie, and find something else to write the paragraph about.
yeah. So I mean, but again, on paper, a film starring Jean-Claude Van Damme, Cynthia Rothrock, Eric Roberts, and Shannon Doherty. Okay,
Yeah.
that sounds a little intriguing, but yeah, not so much. I mean, and that's kind of we see. It seems like we see this quite often nowadays, especially with these low rent films. Is they have these great casts line up, but none of these stars ever share the screen together. At least Shannon Doherty and Van Damme are in the same frame. It's very clear that they are at least in the same frame for their scenes, but you can't say the same about any of the other quote-unquote stars in the film.
Yeah, I know Christina Loken has said she did her scenes with Van Damme because she said she actually really enjoyed working with him, which I think is something that people say. I think he's kind of, obviously I heard he was kind of a pill in the 90s when he was a big star, but he's also younger than him. He's like in his 20s, going into his 30s at that time. So he was, probably not the nicest, whereas I think once he fell down the ranks of the DTV world, I think he was humbled by that, but he started to kind of pick his roles a little bit better and kind of want to be a better actor and do those kinds of things. But yeah, so I think they did the scenes together, but I think Shannon Doherty and also Zach Ward doing scenes together, I think again, because they are James Cullen Brezak mainstays, he can get them kind of whenever, and they'll do the scenes whenever. And I think that was part of it. I think some of these other names, like Eric Roberts, it's just like, when do you have time to do a movie? Well, let's see, I've got, essentially like what that old SCTV sketch I think it was with Michael McDonald, where he's like going from like recording studio to like sing on different tracks. It was Rick Moranis playing him, and he's like running around, just singing everywhere. It's almost like Eric Roberts is doing the same thing. Like, oh, I've got to shoot in Covina or Downey or something, whatever. I can fit you in between these two Asylum movies and this other Randall Emmett movie or whatever. And so they just fit him in there. And again, I mean, I guess I don't think you could pull it off with Eric Roberts because his IMDb page is just so massive that I don't know that you would catch one movie versus another on there. But it's a weird hack because I always think of like you said, all these names who just appear for like a minute or two in the movie, but then they splash them on the cover and they put their names across the title and all that. And it's supposed to get us to view the movie on Hulu or Tubi or whatever. But in this movie, it's just Van Damme on the cover, just his name. So the only way you know that other names are in this movie is by seeing them on IMDb.
Yeah. I mean, look, man. I don't know what more to say. I mean, no. I just left completely disappointed. I'm hoping that by the next time we chat, I'll have better things to say about Kill 'Em All 2, because I really don't have the best things to say about Kill 'Em All 1.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll be surprised. We'll see.
Exactly. No, that's good. Yeah, it's good. So to give people a sense, next. So I'm not sure if it'll be. The episode will air when we're going to record it next month. So then it's a matter of if we record it next month, if it comes out the same month, or but yeah, keep an eye out on socials for that. But yeah, Sean, as we're wrapping up here, anything that you wanted to plug?
Well, I hate to say it, but my particular show, did go to bed. I did have to put that to bed over the summer, actually. However, the final 20 some odd episodes are still available on the Last of the Action Heroes podcast network feed. One of which that you joined me for. Actually, a couple of them that you joined me for are still available. So if anyone is interested in hearing me expound upon the career of Mr. Lundgren, some of those episodes are still available on the Last of the Action Heroes podcast network feed. Other than that, I mean, once I put that particular show to bed, I mean, I don't know. As you've discovered, podcasting is that itch that you got to scratch every now and again, and so. I will say I don't want to say anything definite yet, but me and a buddy have kind of been kicking around the idea of possibly starting another one, looking at at another action star. So I don't want to say it's a definite, but the rumblings have been happening, and so we may be embarking on that venture here in the next year. So stay tuned.
Yeah, so that sounds exciting. I mean, one of the things that I always talk about that I love about your show is that you would talk about the movies. You'd have different people on to talk about the Dolph movies, but then you would interview people that were involved with the production. And I mean, again, the Benjamin Sachs interview was just so telling about like what it was like working not only with Dolph but working with Seagal, but also just sort of how this industry is. And when he was talking about it at the time, it was before the Randall Emmett of. Is that the way to say it? Randall Emmett-ification of the DTV world. Like it was already bad enough when he was, what he was having to deal with at that time. I always remember this quote that he said that the companies, the production company, or the the studios would come to him and say, "How much do you think you can make this movie for?" And he'd say, "I can make it for $5 million." They'd be like, "Okay, make it for $3 million." And it's like, okay, that world has just gotten so much more. Like that was a really great interview. But even like some of the other people that you talked with who did movies with Dolph, where you just would get these stories behind the scenes about things, and sometimes you would even ask them. I think was the director of was it War Pigs? Is that the name of the movie?
Right.
Yeah. Where Ricky Rourke has this big cowboy hat, and you asked him, you were like, does he that wasn't in the script, right? He was just wearing that cowboy hat, and he was like, yes, yeah, we kind of just had to deal with it, Mickey Rourke, we're getting Mickey Rourke in the movie. He wants to wear the cowboy hat, we'll let him wear the cowboy hat. And so, yeah, that stuff was just so it was an insight into this kind of world that we talk about. That it was so great that those names were so gracious and so willing to come on your show and just give us that insight. But it was just those interviews are so fantastic.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I'm glad that someone is out there listening, and I really do. I mean, even though my show is kind of gone and ended, but I appreciate the invite that you're extending to me, and I'm looking forward to chatting again. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think, Van Damme is another name. I mean, obviously your podcast was about Dolph specifically, but when you mentioned that you love Van Damme as well, and, there's a lot of Van Damme direct-to-video that I haven't really covered on the site here. But, this is an interesting year because he had Darkness of Man came out last year, but now he's got Kill 'Em All on Netflix, Darkness of Man on Hulu. So he's not really, I don't know if we call Tubi slumming it, but he's on kind of more of the higher end streamers with Hulu and Netflix. So it's interesting to see him kind of back in that sort of more exalted place. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how Kill 'Em All 2 does, because obviously this movie was a little bit tougher.
Yeah, no. I don't know. I don't want to say too much, but we'll discuss that next time. I think we were going to do Kill 'Em All 1 and 2, right? We were going to do
exactly.
We were going to discuss them both. So okay,
yeah.
So
yeah.
I have my homework set out for me. So
right, exactly, yeah. Because Kill 'Em All 1, I think, is on one of the free streamers. I think it's on like Prime or something. So. So we'll definitely be. I mean, we could even set it. We can kind of see how it goes, as we're watching them. If we want to just, we'll kind of. So people, stay tuned. You'll see the podcast description when that episode comes up, like exactly how much we really, if we do all, do 50-50 or maybe more of one or the other. So yeah, we'll see what happens there.
Yeah. Well, Matt, thank you again. This has been a ton of fun, and I'll see you for the next time for the double whammy of. Kill 'Em All.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you again for coming on, Sean. This was a lot of fun. And thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll be back soon. Bye, everyone.